Okay, I guess we're on. Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Open Access Books Network, live from Berlin today. And I would like to welcome you in our bookmarks session, Open Conversations about Open Access Books. And today our guest is Erzsébet, and I will introduce her first. First, I will permit myself to read a little bit because Erzsébet, your CV is so full of events that I actually have to have. I actually printed it out so that I have it there correctly. So for the professional introduction of Erzsébet, so Erzsébet studied comparative literature in Hungary, where she received her PhD from, I will do my best to pronounce it correctly, Eötvös Loránd University.
Perfect.
Right, for her study on the evolution of certain Hungarian word formation schemata. Erzsébet is also open science advocate, and in 2016, if I remember correctly, she joined a Berlin-Budapest company called Science Open, where she worked as content integration manager and open science advocate. In 2018, Erzsébet moved to Berlin and started her job as open science officer at DARIAH EU, and this is your current position as well. So if I understand correctly, in this job, you're responsible for fostering and implementing open science practices across DARIAH and its cooperating partners. And you contribute to the design and implementation of open science policy statements, guidelines, and services related to the open dissemination of research results in the humanities. I think that that is it for the more professional part of this introduction. However, I always make sure that we introduce our guests as human beings also. So I wanted to, I did some research about Erzsébet. So Erzsébet is also an avid music lover. And when you enter her apartment in Berlin, you might bump into a large black figure, which after a closer inspection turns out to be a cello. A trusted source also tells us that Erzsébet is very particular when it comes to the choice of her jogging clothes. Another well-informed source tells us that she's been repeatedly seen walking around a certain block in Berlin, drinking coffee, and passionately discussing life and open science with her neighbor. Welcome, Erzsébet. It is my great pleasure to have you here. We will start with a set of questions. So I will be interviewing you. However, if someone has an additional question or anything that they would like to add as we go, then please feel free just to jump in. We will be happy to welcome on all your questions. And I'm sure that Erzsébet, the main idea is that you would like to actually seek some feedback from the community.
Exactly.
Here. Exactly. So let's make it into a conversation rather than just two people speaking to each other through a screen. Okay, so Erzsébet, today we're going to talk about this new initiative, which is a fund or a bursary for early career researchers in digital humanities. So I think first things first, I would like to know how you came to the conclusion that such a fund is needed. Which circumstances were involved, and why have you decided into establishing this fund in the first place?
Okay, but first of all, let me thank you for having me, and especially let me thank you this lovely and very thorough introduction uncovering so many dirty secrets of my professional and semi-professional life. Agatha, it was lovely. Thanks a lot. But coming to the point, so the idea to launch this open access book bursary is coming from our advocacy activities at DARIAH. Mm-hmm. So we are having open science, open access training and advocacy services and possibilities in place. And what we see is that having one's first monograph open access is quite a difficult matter. even to those who are the most committed to the open research culture, who are routinely publishing open access articles, sharing data, using outreach, whatever, books are hard not, even to them. And so I think we all know here that, that especially in humanities, turning PhD dissertations into proper research monographs is really a milestone in one's career. And honestly, what I see in many cases is that it's not true, or it's not true anymore, that scholars are afraid of open access. Mm-hmm. They increasingly see the value of open access publishing. They want audience to their book. They want to be on the good side of the history, as our dear former colleague and friend John Tennant framed it. But what they really don't want to compromise is their career. And this is something that I think we need to take serious. So, you know, that there is so many fake news around open access publishing, and so many perceived barriers that are more of perceived barriers than real barriers. But this one seems to be a real one with open access books, because due to the very strong influence of the prestige economy on the current academic tenure and promotion criteria, in most cases, these young scholars still need to choose between their academic career prospects and publishing in fair and community-led open access venues, and this is an issue. Just to cite a quite radical, but I think sufficiently thought-provoking point of view here, I had a conversation with an early career researcher the other day, and she just asked me a question of, Erzsébet, I really don't understand why the whole idea of gold open access had not been optimized for books by default over journals. Because if you think about it, for journals, there are quite established self-archiving policies at place, right? And even if you're not publishing at an open access journal, you just self-archive it, and once the embargo, which is also like quite an established practice with journals, is over after a year or so, then you're free to share it, and there you go. And we don't really have the same thing for books. We are discussing usually much less digitized, much less online workflows. So this is really an issue.
Great. I think that pretty much you covered my second question already. So I'm going to skip it, I think, because I wanted to ask why this specific crowd. So why early researchers in digital humanities? But I think unless you would like to add something, I think that you touched on it already.
Yeah, like for digital humanities, you know, like my organization, DARIAH, which organization I forgot to introduce you at the beginning, like we are a European Research Infrastructure Consortium for the digitally enabled arts and humanities. We are present in 19 European countries currently, and it is the digital humanities communities that we are primarily serving, you know, really in an inclusive, like digital humanities in the most inclusive possible sense. And we just wanted to keep the scope of the call manageable, you know, and if we open it up for the whole humanities crowds, then it's a little bit difficult to oversee, and we have a perspective that is most accurate for digital humanities. This is what we try to oversee, and honestly, I wouldn't be confident to review from across the whole domain submissions. That's one thing. Regarding early career researchers, I'm not always a big fan of I just see Julia's question, how do we define early career researchers? Julia, in the definition, we are going to follow the definition that is applied by the European Research Council and by Horizon Europe, because we need to align our definitions on the European scope. But so I'm not always a big fan of the idea and all the complaints about how difficult it is for early career researchers to enter in the open research culture, I think it can be a very controversial statement. So I would rather call attention to the specific situation of publishing one's first monograph open access. It's difficult because it's a delicate question in terms of identity as well, because you establish it's a big milestone in one's career, a milestone of establishing herself or himself in a certain field of area, right? So it's also important that like to give them the freedom of choice and possibility to publish their monograph in the book series that is topically the most relevant to them. So this is one thing. But we also saw a big gap in the funding structures. That is like we see a lot of positive changes when it comes to open access monographs, you know, like big research funders are increasingly extending their open access mandates to books like Horizon Europe, but also national funders. But first monographs are usually not coming from externally funded grant projects, right? They are coming from dissertations. And on the other hand, we also see that due to transformative agreements and otherwise, like institutions are increasingly having open access funds institutionally. But this is also tricky because in many cases, you know, like people publishing their first monograph are not necessarily faculty members. It's hard sometimes for institutions to distribute this funding. They prefer to, you know, like to serve more established senior staff. Early career researchers are also fluid in terms of affiliation. They might typically depart in their career when they're moving institutions. So institutional funds are tricky as well, and they are not always covered the whole cost of book publishing. Interestingly, in many cases, what we see is that they are able to offer the same amount of money as a usual article processing charge costs, but we all know that this is not enough. So here the gap that we are trying to, you know, just mitigate a little bit.
That's great. So that's also a nice segue because you mentioned APCs. So now I wanted to ask you about VPCs, because the way the bursary is constructed now, or is thought of now, is that the cap is set at 7,000 euro, right? And with this thought in mind that would be the money that researchers can then pay their book processing charges with. So here a little bit perhaps of a more provocative question for you here. So this is the thought behind it. And of course, one could say that the fund then, rather than encouraging investing in some sort of innovative models, actually perpetuates status quo with BPCs, which are very often obscenely high and not really justified. So how would you respond to such criticism?
I love your term obscenely high, and cannot agree more. You know, like I could use the argument that is usually hijacked, a hijacked argument in the conversations around open access and pay to publish models, and play out the card of like academic freedom and stuff, which I mentioned that it's really important for early career researchers to like construct their identity in like via the book series that is topically the most relevant to them. So this is important, but this is again a tricky argument. And honestly, the dominant reason why we decided to go for this is something different. That is, it's come from, again, our advocacy practice and from feeling the weight of our advocacy and the weight of one decision to, in this situation, to finding pathways to get their monograph open access. This is a big decision, and in the current reality, I would say, we really cannot tell someone, I will be super honest here, we really cannot tell someone that, sure, you can ignore all this prestige game that is going on with big publisher names, simply because it's not true. I would not be sleeping, I would not be able to sleep very well if I knew that I'm playing with somebody's career, giving such advices, you know. So this is the sad reality. And we know that the current prestige-based incentives are really bad and detrimental. We really hate it. And at DARIAH, we work a lot and fight a lot to change this for the better. We find it super important to connect authors and future authors with fair open access players, to show alternatives, to show the value of them. And in the policy side, we also work a lot in advising the European Commission to change the incentives and change the assessment mechanisms for the better. But we also see that in this situation, this is changing slowly. Assessment frameworks are changing slowly. And we simply just cannot say to those who are seeking funding for their open access book and are worried about the prestige game, we just simply cannot tell them that, okay, please come back 3 years later because the situation will be much better by then, right? So this is clearly a compromise. But we need to give them, in addition to changing the publication landscape and scholarly communication for the better, in addition to these long-term and very active efforts of ours, and by ours I mean collectively ours, not only DARIAH, we need to be honest and face the current situation and give a little bit of an immediate help to the scholars. So this is clearly a compromise, but I think is a reasonable one. And so we really try to set up a right balance here in this call. And I think this will be a key success criteria, but will be only a tricky thing to do at the same time. So this is why we decided to keep a price cap that clearly keeps the unfair big players out of the game and exclude those venues who are like, we don't want to pay profits, right? We don't want to give this money to somebody's pocket, right? We want to add value in digital humanities scholarship. So that's the price cap, and we can open a discussion about whether the 7,000 euros is a sensible one or not. We were trying to collect all the data, all the BPC data that is available, and make this decision based on this. And the second thing that can contribute to the success of the call and will help to make sure that we do this the right way is that we want to be educative at the same time, also implicitly and explicitly in the call, which means that we want to support the launch of the call with a series of blog posts in which we do, interviews with scholars published in fair open access players. We want to show alternatives. We want to support or encourage or even reward innovative practices, that is XML-based publication or data sharing, or like somebody is doing something exciting about the deeper integration of scholarship into a digital book format. So we try to keep a balance here, but on the other hand, I think this is a question of compromise. And so this call will not replace our efforts to transform open access book publishing for the better. But hopefully this will be a temporary kind of bridging call that gives immediate help to the scholars.
Fair enough. That put my brain at ease a little bit. Good.
A little bit.
Thank you for that. If I understand correctly, the project is at very, very early stages right now. Mm-hmm. So how do you see the next steps and the implementation?
Okay, so I think the most difficult thing to do was to set up a criteria that is sensible enough and detailed enough and manages all the expectations of all the parties, which we nearly finished. And so after having this discussion with you and have some input from you regarding this criteria, we are planning to launch the call in April. And this is also a timeline that is not yet like that is still tentative, but, and you can, I mean, all of you can tell us whether it's sensible or not, but the idea is to keep it open until December. So it's quite a long time because it's COVID and everything, and also the applicants need to enclose a letter of support from their publishers. So it also involves dealing with external parties as well. So our idea to keep it open until December. And then we will review the winner in January. Unfortunately, currently we have money to publish one monograph, open access per year. So this is why I was trying to emphasize that it's a super small, like it's a drop in the sea. It's a super small contribution to the open book publishing landscape. But I can imagine later on, like we can pilot it this year, we can see whether we receive 0 applications or 100, or optimally a number in between these two. And if it's successful and if we indeed set up the criteria sensibly and everything and everybody is happy, I can imagine that later on other actors, other infrastructures, other science funders, other digital humanities organizations might join forces with us.
That's great. I can already see that there are some questions in the chat box, but I will address it, which is great, but I will address them in a second, because I also wanted to ask you, which perhaps will be a nice intro to these questions that we have in the chat. So in your blog post, you say that you would like to, and that's a quote, open up a consultation about specific details of the bursary to make sure that we do it right. So I sense a bit of uncertainty here. So I wanted to ask which details of the bursary have been set and which areas would you welcome feedback on still at this point?
Okay. Thanks a lot for this question, because I was I added that passage to the blog post for openly selfish reasons. You know, this is the first time we are doing this. This is the first time we are launching such a thing. And I know that the collective brain of the open access book network is just simply amazing, and you're all much more experienced in doing such and managing such things. And so we also, while working on the criteria, we also looked over the shoulder of big funders, smaller funders, institutional funds as well. We also consulted important documents like the Spark document on sustainable scholarly communication and stuff. We also consulted Pierre Mounier and a couple of other people. But still, this is the first time we do this. We realized that this is a complex task. So I think if we have a little bit, I think we have a little bit of a time. So if you give me, let's say 10 minutes before I'm going to stop talking, I could just quickly and step by step guide you through the implementation criteria, and we can collectively take a look, and you can tell. I will flag the open issues or the issues that are not 100% decided yet, and then you can tell me what you think.
I think that sounds great. Go ahead.
Cool.
Just to give you a heads up, we have some questions here about the definition of the early career researchers. That came up twice already. So I think that would be definitely something to look into. And then we also have another question from Eric, who is asking about a selection process. Is any proposed by an ECR funded? And I think that you will address these questions in in the presentation.
Exactly. So you're managing the suspense, Agatha.
Okay, here we go. Okay. So, and co-host, so you can share your screen, right?
Also, before sharing my screen, let me just, because I pushed the whole thing to Google Slides as well, which gives the opportunity to everybody who couldn't make it today to, wait, let me paste the link to my very minimalistic presentation to the chat and now share my screen, and now you can follow it along. So the thing is that those who know me, my slides are usually looking much nicer, but I decided to be very to the point with this. So, oh, sorry, wrong one.
Well, I mean, we can look at this one too if it's any.
No.
Okay.
Just give me a second. I will find the right one. I will just open it. But so yeah, we broke it down to different areas like audience and stuff, and it's just a little bit slow, but now it should be okay. Now it's loading, and I can come back to the screen sharing. Sorry for the funny interlude. I think by this time, all of us should be really pros in screen sharing, but let me just retry it because it's still not fully loaded. I really hope that my computer is not going to die.
Okay.
In the meantime, sorry for that. My PowerPoint is just got frozen. Let me just, but if you can follow along the Google Slides, then I can just share that. And
yes, but I think that is the link that is in our chat now the correct one.
Yes. Okay. So you should be able to share my screen now, I think. Sorry for that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So the thing is that, sorry for the typo, like I just pushed it to Google Slides right now, so the conversion might result in a little bit of a noise, but anyway, long story short, you were asking about the applicants. The definition of early career researchers, as I told previously, we are going to follow the official definition of the European Research Council and Horizon 2020. So I don't know it by heart, but as far as I remember, but I don't want to talk nonsense here, is early career researchers is somebody within 5 years from like up to 5 years from the defense of their PhD. But this is something we are going to double check. But point is, there is a definition, like a widely agreed definition for that we are going to stick to. We are not going to invent something from the scratch. It's also important that scholars should be affiliated with an institution that is in a DARIAH country. I think it's sensible. And of course, we are going to ask for a clear funding statement somewhere in the book. I think this is the easy part, but I might be wrong. So if you still have questions, and if you still flag issues, see issues, please feel free to flag them in the chat, and we can discuss it afterwards. Criteria regarding the book. So first we needed to define digital humanities somehow, right? And I said at the beginning, good luck for us to that, because if you going to the dedicated website where people collect definitions of digital humanities, you will find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So we made up something here that is, I think, quite inclusive. So digital humanities is defined in a broad sense of the theory and practice of developing, applying, and reflecting upon digital tools, methods, and assets in humanities research. This is, of course, a broad definition. If we receive submissions from digital humanities labs that are really like the sine qua non and like really in the center of digital humanities research, this will be a plus in the application. But otherwise, we are quite inclusive. Yes, we want to keep it for first publications, but as Agatha flagged this issue earlier, we are also aware that the notion of one's PhD and the notion of one's first monograph can be intertwined from time to time. And depending on which country you are, you might face institutional policies that you need to publish your dissertation in order to defend it. So that's a little bit tricky, and I know that scholars are sometimes going for compromistic solutions. I know a case where somebody was declined from an open access book fund because she already published her monograph on microfilm in order to be able to defend it. So there are anomalies, and we want to be inclusive here as well. So if somebody shares his or her PhD in an open repository in whatever format, we won't consider it as first publication. So this is, I think, something important to highlight. Yes, and I think this is a core criteria. We are asking for an expression of interest letter from the publisher so that we can make sure that that the publisher is really interested in publishing the work in question. I think this is a kind of a cornerstone criteria. Regarding the venue and format, sorry again, the typo is a result of the PowerPoint Google Docs conversion. This is a tricky one actually, and please let me know if you have any better ideas to do this. I know that there was a previous episode of the OABN meetings where you already discussed the notion of fair open access publishers in the context of the University of Leuven. So what we ask for is that the publisher should be listed in the DOAB. So far, so good. we didn't terribly seriously narrow the fair publishers by doing so, right? But we also wish the publisher that to be operated in alignment with the SPARC good practice principles with scholarly communication services. So this is another safeguard for fairness. And we have also certain technical maturity criteria as well. So we prefer publishers with digital workflows. We prefer publishers who give DOIs. We prefer innovative solutions that I mentioned again, all the kind of publishing methods that go beyond the digital simulacrum of a PDF. Also because it's digital humanities and we know that this potential is coming with the field. But if you have any other criteria in mind regarding how to keep a good balance between enabling scholars to keep with their topically most relevant book series, but also make sure that we are not fueling profits, it's very welcome. I know it's a big one. We are struggling with this a lot. But further, access conditions, I think this should be easy. So Creative Commons, we are asking for Creative Commons licenses, but we prefer CC BY, of course, but we, especially in the light of current anomalies uncovered by Martin Paul Eve, we are not sticking to Creative Commons CC BY licenses. It can be something more restrictive, but the point is it should be Creative Commons. We are aware that in many cases, publishers are asking extra, like charging extra money for the CC BY. We are going to turn back to this very soon as well. Okay, other details. Hold on, I think this is the last but one. slide. So as we told, the publication costs will be reimbursed by up to maximum 700 euro, including the VAT. And here is again an open issue for you. We can imagine having the licensing issue mentioned. We can imagine that publishers might ask extra costs for CC BY, and they might ask extra costs for, I don't know, adding good quality visualizations if this is relevant for the publication. But if you could just let me know whether you find this keeping an extra 1,000 euro reserved for possible extra charges, whether you find it a good idea, whether you find it too much, whether you find it too less, what kinds of other costs you can imagine to happen in such situations, that would be super welcome. A combination of funding is not possible because if you add up this, I think already quite generous 7,000 euros and a couple of 100,000 from institutional funds, then you can easily add up being in a position to pay for the stellar book processing charges. So this is something we definitely want to exclude. Funding approval is valid for 12 months. Recipients should be responsible for the settlement of the fee and the contact with the publishers. And again, beneficiaries should add appropriate funding acknowledgement to DARIAH. You also asked about the evaluation workflow. I think in this respect, a cornerstone part of the application will be the expression of interest from the publisher. This is a must. And this also serve as primary filtering. So this way we can start from a higher baseline. And the secondary filtering, sorry for the tutus, I feel very uncomfortable with how ugly my slides are looking, but luckily this is the last one. The secondary filtering or decision-making is done internally by a DARIAH body. It's going to be a combination of the DARIAH Scientific Board and DARIAH Central Office, and we haven't yet decided the exact members of the body, but almost. So the decision-making will be based on a book proposal and one chapter. So this is the material that the DARIAH internal body is going to receive. We had a long discussion about peer review and book peer review. Mm-hmm. And we were back and forthing many times whether internal peer review conducted within the publisher should be a funding condition. But at the end, we decided not to because we all could name cases where somebody's dissertation was quite directly turned into a publication, and since the dissertation was thoroughly reviewed by the examiners, the reviewers of the dissertation itself, there was no peer review conducted by the publisher. So we decided not to stick for peer review within the publishing house. But the book proposal and the sample chapter is a sufficient amount of material based on which the internal DARIAH body can make informed decisions. So I think that's that. This is what we set up so far. And yes, I'll stop talking. I'm super curious about your comments.
No, that's great. Thank you, Erzsébet. I think that it was very helpful to actually see all of these criteria. We have lots of questions. So, by the way,
cool.
If people who actually type these questions, if you just want to speak rather than type, then this is definitely the time. If not, then I will just try to read through these questions. We had several questions about the definition of the early career researchers. So I think that definitely proves that this is probably something that needs very, very clear definition.
Yes, yes.
We have quite interesting questions coming from Tessa. Tessa, would you like to just talk to us, or?
I would. I just need to refocus my camera because it went out of focus when I turned it off.
Right.
Yeah. So my question was about because I'm in Germany, and of course in Germany the issue is that you have to publish your dissertation before you're even awarded the PhD, and I'm not exactly sure what the early career researcher definition is. I know that the early stage researcher, I think there's a difference between early stage and early career. And I think early stage is after your master, the 4 or 5 years, and early career probably after your PhD, but I'm not exactly sure about the specifics of what they mean after your PhD. So in the German case, it might be that it's really only after you have your title, by which point you will have to have published your monograph already. So maybe if this could be worded in a way that makes clear. And I think in other funding contexts, it doesn't matter because the timeline of publishing the monograph isn't really the point for them. But maybe there could be a solution of saying after the defense of the PhD, but before, potentially before the award, in case it's contingent on the publication of the monograph or something like that. It was just something that came to my mind. I'm not sure if the issue exists in other countries. I know it doesn't exist in English-speaking countries, but yeah, just something that I thought of.
This is super important. Thanks a lot for raising this issue, Tessa. And you see exactly these are the kinds of anomalies in response of which we decided to fund this small open book bursary. So yes, absolutely, we will make it sure that the definition is inclusive with those without the title, of course, because what's the point otherwise? So yes, this is for sure. We certainly will not expect anyone to have the title already. I will discuss about the defense, but I think it shouldn't be a condition either. So yeah, I think we need to be flexible with this.
Great, thank you so much. Erzsébet, we have quite an interesting question coming from Julia also. Julia, would you like to just speak by yourself, or shall I go? Oh, you unmuted yourself, so I think you want to.
Hello, okay. Yes, I can talk. This is just, again, a definition question. You've talked about member countries, and I know DARIAH differentiates between countries who participate as a partner and countries that are member countries. Can all of the countries that are somewhat associated with DARIAH apply, or academics affiliated to those institutions, or only partner countries?
Yeah, this is a very good question, Julia, and thanks a lot for giving me the chance to clarify this. Thing is, usually we are very inclusive when it comes to funding opportunities. So when it's about a training or a winter school or whatever, we usually make sure that we have a sufficient disciplinary coverage. However, in the case of this one, we decided to be strict and keep it strict to the DARIAH member countries. And unfortunately, this comes with the exclusion of the DARIAH cooperating members, such as, I will check the situation with Switzerland, because Switzerland is somewhere in between, as an observer country, but still not yet full member. But the thing is that, we need to justify the redistribution of the funding that we receive from the DARIAH member countries. It's the DARIAH member countries who co-finance DARIAH. And we need to be accountable in terms of the added value that we give back to them. And because of this, we need to be quite strict in this respect and keep the scope of eligibility to the institutions who are coming from full DARIAH member countries, which means that if you are a Swiss researcher or if you are a British researcher, but you do your PhD in Poland, then you are eligible. So the point is that it's the criteria is really focusing on the institution rather than the nationality of the researcher.
Thank you.
Perfect. Erzsébet, there is a question from Toby, who had to leave, unfortunately, but he has a very good excuse because he's leading a workshop which starts at 5. So, but I will still ask his question. So he says, I'm not sure that this has already been covered. So apologies if I missed that. I wondered if PhDs or postdocs that don't currently have a formal affiliation with a European higher education institution would be eligible to apply. I know this is quite an issue for lots of early career researchers in the humanities, which I think is an excellent point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is also my point regarding the availability or non-availability of institutional funds. It's open, but we are going to check the institution that awarded the PhD. So the PhD awarding institution, or that not awarded, who is about to award if it's not a postdoc, the title. And so we check the eligibility of this institution. That is, no worries if you have currently no affiliation. It depends on in which institution you did the grad school.
Okay, fair enough. There is also a comment coming from Eric. Eric, maybe you would like to tell us a little bit more about it, because at one point Erzsébet asked, because there is a cap in this bursary at 7,000 euro, but you also were thinking perhaps we can allow another 1,000 for some additional services. And Eric here says, I think a flat amount has better incentives. Eric, would you like to speak to that a little bit more?
Sure. So just a comment, if you have a publisher who has decided that 7,000 euros is way too much for a book processing charge and charges everyone 5,000 euros, are you only going to give them 5,000 euros? Thus incentivizing people to ask for 7,000 euros instead of 5,000 euros.
That's true. And I know that this is one of the big issues about the pay to publish models in general. I see this as a recurrent issue, but honestly, I don't know how to tackle this. I honestly don't know how to tackle this. So any ideas to do this right are welcome.
Yeah, so if this model, spreads, then all publishers will raise their list price to 7,000 euros, no matter what. And then, they will extend sort of discounts or incentives so that the real price will, for a researcher, might be lower or higher if the publisher just wants to, make as much money as they can on peripheral services and stuff. So the other thing I wanted to ask is, have you thought about the possibility of providing non-financial incentives for publishers? So, you have publishers who sell books, especially to libraries. They depend on sort of marketing and prestige. And so, like, you have awards for books, and if you can put on the front cover or in your catalog that this is a DARIAH award-winning publication, they can make more money, from people say, okay, I only have this amount of money, but I want to support this publisher by buying, this print copy of a book instead of, this, publisher that we hate or whatever.
This is
this is thought about that.
This is an excellent point, Eric. And I was thinking about that. First of all, publishers whom we hate, hopefully we will be able to keep outside of this, due to the price cap. But one thing, I was thinking exactly the same as you just mentioned, that in optimum case, in optimum scenario, the bursary would gain prestige, real community, the prestige that is not coming from a publisher brand, but can actually serve as an alternative to publishing brands. And then we could decrease the amount of money and that's a difficult word, diversify it, the same amount of money to more books. This I can totally see happening because I'm honestly optimistic about this. But in order to do this, like prestige always needs time. So we need to kick it off quite efficiently. We need to make it loud. We need to survive the first year, the first round, and then it hopefully will bring the bursary, the prestige that will enable us to do these changes that you suggest. So this is exactly the plan, yes.
Publicity is just as good as prestige for a publisher. Maybe not for a researcher, but publicity, you know, is what can sell books.
On the another hand, like another small guarantee that I see for like not raising the bar for list prices for publishers, this is a small thing. Unfortunately, we are not Horizon Europe, we are not Science Europe, not even the DFG. So we will not be able to disrupt the open access book market, but by giving money for one monograph per year. But on the other hand, like we are not directly contacting publishers. We are targeting authors with a letter of interest from their publishers with like cost calculations. So in optimum case, publishers will not be necessarily emphasized and necessarily aware that they are in a position to ask up to 7,000 euros. They will give a price estimation to the future author. The future author will come back to us with that price estimation. So there is not direct communication at that phase in this respect between the presses and the pots, the money pots.
Hopefully there will be other money pots.
I really hope so.
I think that's the hope here. I will allow time for one more question because we have one from Julia, an additional one about who would be eligible and who wouldn't be eligible, but we are running out of time, so we have to speed up a little bit. So Julia is asking if a researcher was affiliated to a DARIAH member country, but they are currently affiliated to a non-DARIAH member country, will they be eligible? Is the doctoral award that drives the eligibility or the current affiliation?
Oh, Julia, that's a very good question.
Julia just wants to be eligible. That's the thing. Just
I need to,
yeah.
That kind of reflects the environment of early career researchers.
Absolutely.
There is a lot of movement, especially within the European countries, and we rarely see a doctoral student here kind of progressing to a position in the same institution. So although, yes, it's a complex question, it is the unfortunate reality of many early career researchers that unfortunately need to move.
I would say, I will discuss this question internally within DARIAH. The original idea, as I told, is that we are going to have a look at the institution, the awarding institution who awards or going to award or awarded a title. But of course, it would not look nice if the winner would necessarily be awarded outside of the DARIAH member countries. So I will discuss this. I'm not 100% sure about the eligibility of such cases, but almost 100% sure because we are going to look at the institutions, as I told you. But one important thing before we finish is that for such cases, not much after the official launch of the call, in May or June, we are going to organize an information day, like a virtual one, of course, an online one, and give the opportunity to applicants to ask this kind of like borderline cases, and we can discuss them and we can say something terminative, like say a final word about that. So we will have the chance to address this in an information day. And of course, Julia, if you're interested, you know where to find me. So I can confirm this to you officially after our call and after I discuss this internally.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think that on that note, I will close the session now. Thank you so much, Erzsébet, and thank you all of you who contributed, especially with really complicated questions that only showed us that it is a complicated issue indeed.
It is.
And that early career researchers, that their lives are not that easy. And we somehow have to address their needs. So thank you all for that. Thank you very much. And as for our next upcoming events of the Open Access Books Network, please be with us also next week on Tuesday. We are starting a new series, the Voices from the Open Access Books community. This is a series of workshops. We're going to look into a possible Plan S for books. And the first event next Tuesday is going to look at the policy scope, and we will also introduce the whole idea to you. So if you can make it, please do. It's open to everybody. You have to register. We tweeted about it extensively, so I think that you've seen it around already. Thank you so much again, and yeah, I hope to see you all next Tuesday. Oh, there is. Yes.
Yeah, if you have any comments on the specific criteria, you can leave them directly on the Google Slides, or you can follow up by tweeting on me or texting on me or dropping an email anytime. I would be super grateful for that. So please feel free to do this.
Well, Erzsébet, you already have people saying that they will definitely chase you after this because they have some ideas. So yes, you can expect some feedback. Thank you again. Thank you. Bye for today.